makes better products.
Right, I think we're going to close down the part that deals with Google and their premium business model and try to concentrate the rest of the panel on cash, new forms of payment systems. I think that a good way to close down that part of the discussion is that, yes, it's correct that from a technology point of view, there's nobody who can prevent anybody else from making a search engine. Just as nobody could prevent anybody else from making an operating system or a new type of computer, maybe except for patents. But the fact is that most of us today cannot imagine a world where Facebook and Google are not our premium services. And there are huge advantages in terms of the data collected already that can prevent other competitors to enter the market. But on the other hand, it is more, it's almost as certain as amen in the church that something is going to happen, not because the Danish government or the European community tells us that we need to have a competitor to Google or to Facebook, but because there's money in making a competitor. And I'm certain that if we had this conference in 5 years, there will be something entirely new that would position Facebook and Google to a large extent as the incumbents, the old guys on the panel, and we will see something new because there are people who can make money on this happening. And this is actually eventually what is going to save us from a monopolist in this area, I think. Then let's move to discuss payment systems. And I think I would like to ask you, Jonas, some of those payment systems that you mentioned were radically new. Some of those were basically old types or new types of providing something on top of the old Visa, MasterCard monopoly in the sense, or oligopoly in the sense that it was just new ways of using that old credit card, debit card system that is up there and working. But things like Bitcoins and Flatter and companies like that, how do you think they have a chance? Or do you think they will change something?
Well, in general, I would say the launch or announcement of Google Wallet that came now in the fall. I don't remember which date it was. What I find fascinating with that product, but also it shows kind of progression within Google, how to add new services around some kind of core product. And in this case, to some surprise, it's very much a close relationship to the old traditional banking industry, Visa or MasterCard and so on. So they are bundling the services and so on. But in general, we can see that right now there is a battle between the financial companies, banks, others, to provide new, say, payment services. And we also see that a lot of startups is coming up in this way. We see PayPal as was one of the first big ones, but also that we can see new startups like NetSwipe, SquareUp, that makes a lot of money in this area. And then, as you mentioned, the Bitcoin, which is something I don't think it will last, but I think it's, as a phenomenon, is extremely interesting because we have a currency that we can use that is not controlled by a government. Whether this will last for a longer time or not, well, let the future tell. But regardless of what, it's interesting that it's possible in today's digitalized world to announce a new currency that can be used to buy and sell or purchase products. So in that way, the area of payments is probably one of the most, the area that gets a lot of attention, at least, in the press on what is going to happen. We can also say that in this cashless society product, we do collaborate with Danske Bank and other nets and so on. And we do have an issue in Europe with the European Union. The European Central Bank pushes banks to innovate in this area. So tell them, please collaborate, do something that can make some difference. At the same time, the competition agency sues the banks for doing that, for collaborating. So there's a difficulty of navigating for the, say, financial institutions today.
Maybe you could explain a little bit more about what is Bitcoins, because that would probably give people an idea of what we are talking fundamentally changing here, if something's going to happen.
How should we explain it? It's a currency that is only digital in way. There's an exchange rate to $. I don't remember the correct currency rate right now, but there's a slow increase of the number of money Bitcoins that exist. Then that will continue to grow, I think, until 2040. There's a specific algorithm to increase the number of currencies and that can actually be used to buy and sell mainly within, say, the software community today. On the open source community, the uses Bitcoins as and so what is interesting is that anyone can put up their own Bitcoin hub and be a provider of Bitcoins to others. There's one up in northern part of Sælg. I don't remember the guys' names right now, but there's a site where you can get your Bitcoins here in Denmark. And what this will do is, so since it surpasses the traditional infrastructure, it will have the central banks of countries will have a limited control of the currency, and in particular, if there's a larger sums of transactions going on there, that could make them to want to control this, but also they have less, in particular, they have less control of currencies, and it's expected might to be used for activities that we don't want to see in the body, like crime and so on, but also for terrorism. There has been discussion whether this is an issue. No one.
I think that wrapping up this panel by discussing new forms of payment systems brings us to a certain extent back to the freemium model, because as Jonas mentioned, Bitcoins is just like some of the old models from the start of the internet. Some of you might remember DigiCash or the talks about digital cash based on cryptography. It is to a certain extent something that is theoretically very interesting, but because there is no regulation, and by the end of the day, because it's not backed by taxpayers in shape of a government, then it's difficult to see whether this is going to happen or not. It might have its niche functions, but how it brings us back to the freemium model would probably be that it's also today, when Bitcoins is not that developed, it's more a kind to barter economy, that you have something that you want to trade with me. Instead of writing up an agreement, we just exchange some Bitcoins. And that brings us back to the barter economy today, without using Bitcoins, is an essential part of new business models. In fact, an essential part of Google's business model, because we barter my attention to get your services. And of course, then I'll pay for premium with old school money, but I pay with something that I have, which is my intention, and you give me something that you have, your services. And what is of course interesting is that if we are moving to that in that direction, where we are more trading things without actually setting a price based on money, I think that can happen in to a certain extent. Also, you can see that crowdsourcing, crowdfunding is a part of that trend. Very simple. If you actually allow people to use some of your spare computer processing facilities on your computer for crunching data, then this is kind of a barter economy. And the big question here is, of course, how to regulate that, and I guess in a Danish setting, how to tax that, because there is actually, I don't get any. I actually share something of value with Google, but nobody's taxing me for it, and that's probably going to be a big challenge in the future, I think. If there's nobody else who wants to contribute, I think that we exactly hit the mark, 1:15. And I will thank my co-panelists for this interesting discussion, and the rest of you not for contributing, but being so nice and quiet.